All right, let's get finished with this chapter, chapter 6, with this last clip. All right, and we're going to talk about modern portfolio theory. Modern portfolio theory. So in 1952, Harry Markowitz postulated the modern portfolio theory, which makes it not so modern. It was more modern when I first read about it back in 1980, way back in 1980. All right, so it's not so modern. He said that rational investors are risk averse. Okay? Risk aversion does not mean investors avoid risk. Risk aversion does not mean investors seek risk. Risk aversion means risk is assumed only when one expects to be adequately compensated for assuming the risk. Therefore, there must be a direct or positive relationship between risk and return. The more risk you take on, the more return you need to take on the risk. The more return you expect, the higher the risk that you expect as well. Okay? All right. So again, the higher the anticipated risk, the higher the expected return must be. That is risk aversion. Okay. So modern portfolio theory, or MPT, focuses on building diversified portfolios by combining assets whose returns are not highly correlated. So we look at that statistic of correlation, try to factor that in. It then goes one step farther by stressing the concept of efficiency. And we'll talk about efficiency on the next slide. Okay? Finally, investors are required to construct indifference or utility curves. So we're going to put together correlation, efficiency, and indifference or utility curves. And from doing all this, we'll determine where on the efficient frontier, and we'll look at the efficient frontier, an investor should be. All right, so let's drill a little deeper and look at this. All right, efficiency means that for a given level of risk, a certain level of standard deviation, there is no portfolio with a higher expected return. It also means that for a given level of expected return, there is no portfolio with a lower risk. In other words, it is portfolios with the best combination of risk and return. So for a certain risk level, there's not another portfolio that has a higher expected return. For a certain return level, there's not another portfolio out there that has a lower expected risk. So it's the best combination of risk and return. And again, this is all theoretical, modern portfolio theory. All right, if you plot all of the possible portfolios of risky assets on a graph that has expected return on the y-axis and standard deviation on the x-axis, then the efficient frontier would dominate all of the risky portfolios. And we'll take a look at such a graph in just a minute. And let me tell you that there are software packages available that will build an efficient frontier. Okay? Therefore, the efficient frontier contains all of the optimal portfolios. All right? So in order to determine the optimal portfolio for an individual investor, in other words, there are a number of optimal portfolios out there in the universe. The question is, which optimal portfolio is right for you? Okay? You have to add the investor's utility curves. This is highly theoretical stuff, all right? But it does make us think deeply about our portfolios and what we want out of our portfolios, the costs of our portfolios. It really requires some deep thought, okay? So each investor has their own risk and return trade-offs, and so we're going to combine the unique risk-return profile of a client with the optimal portfolios that are out there. Okay, that's what the efficient frontier is, and that's what modern portfolio shows us. So the steeper the utility curves for each individual, the more risk averse an investor is. And the more risk an investor is, the more return an investor requires to take on more risk. So the added return required to take on an added unit of risk goes up, okay? All right, and then where the utility curves come into contact with the efficient frontier, it shows us exactly which portfolio is optimal for a client, okay? All right, let's take a look. Here we go. Here we go. So here we have standard deviation on the x-axis, and we have expected return on the y-axis, okay? These dots represent all of the risky portfolios out there, okay? Now the efficient frontier are these portfolios here. If you connect these portfolios here, this is the efficient frontier. All of these portfolios have the best combination of risk and return. So this portfolio, for this level of return, has the lowest amount of risk, okay? This portfolio has a little bit lower return and higher risk. It is clearly less optimal than this portfolio here, okay? This portfolio here, you might say, well, this portfolio is superior to this portfolio. No, it is not. It is different. It is not superior. The return level of this portfolio is higher than this portfolio, clearly, but the risk level is also higher, okay? So the question becomes, where on this efficient frontier should a client be? And that is a function of the utility curves. Should the client be here? Should the client be here? Or should the client be up here? Where on this curve, this efficient frontier, where should the client be? And that is a function of their risk-return objectives. Now, a client might say, well, listen, I don't want to take any more standard deviation than here, okay? Well, guess what? You're off the efficient frontier. There's no way to be here. But let's say the client says, I want to be here. If you're able to take this, then you go all the way up here and over here, and your expected return is up here, okay? So where you are, so that's why I say, as a portfolio manager, first thing you have to determine is how much standard deviation can you take, okay? And now you might talk to a client, they might say, I have got to have, I don't know, 10% rate of return. To make my end goal, I have to have a 10% rate of return. And so you go up here and you come over and you say, to get a 10% rate of return, you're going to have to take this much risk. And the client says, oh, I can't do that. Well, now you got a big problem. Now you got a big problem. You must reconcile with the client the trade-off between the return they desire and the risk they're going to have to take on. That reconciliation has to happen. Okay. So that's modern portfolio theory. It's combining correlation, putting them together in portfolios, looking at all of the risky portfolios, determining which portfolios are efficient in terms of their combination of risk and return, connecting those portfolios to make the efficient frontier, and then finding the utility curves of clients. And you go through a questionnaire process in order to ascertain this. Once you have this all together, then you use the efficient frontier to build a portfolio for a client. Okay, and there's software available to do that. All right, so we're finished with Chapter 6. We'll move on to Chapter 7, where we'll take modern portfolio to the next level. All right, peace out. Shalom.